As we approach the end of Black History Month, we take a look at the role diversity plays in coaching. Unkwa Sonye joins us now in studio with more. Unkwa?
Hey, Carmen, when we look at how coaching is handled, I mean, depending on who you are, let's go back to the beginning of the month. Brian Flores' lawsuit against the NFL was either a rude shock or a lingering reminder. For fans of color, Flores' claim reinforces that racial bias still exists when it comes to hiring diverse head coaches. Now, while all of this is happening at the professional level, what does it say about coaching youth sports here at home? And why does that matter? To answer this question in part, let's provide a little bit of context. According to the Connecticut Department of Education, 10% of public school faculty and staff are of color. Now, that is in stark contrast to a student population where 51% of those students are of color. The Central Connecticut Conference is the biggest public school league with 32 schools that are members, and only 6 of those head coaches are diverse. When you do the math, that's at a rate of about 18%. But this issue isn't limited to just one conference. Eddie Santiago was the head varsity football coach at Harding High School in Bridgeport until last month when he was let go, which led to a petition and a rally for his reinstatement. In his time on the sidelines, he struggled to find peers of color that ran programs.
There's not many of us. There's probably like, I would say 22 minority coaches, probably in the whole state. And there's a ton, way more schools than that in Connecticut.
Santiago became Harding's head coach in 2014 after being the interim the season before. One of his first orders of business, hiring a diverse staff of coaches.
Before, when we was at Harding, we didn't have much success. We was able to put a staff together that was very diverse and was able to relate to the kids, and the program kind of turned around.
In his 8 seasons of leadership, Santiago and the presidents earned 2 state playoff berths and sent multiple athletes off to play in college. Santiago's connection to the program is personal as a former Harding player who was impacted by his head coach.
When I came back, I wanted to give kids an opportunity to have the same experience that I had as a Harding football player. And my head coach was Damon Lewis, which was the son of John Lewis, the great John Lewis at Harding. And they were pillars in our community.
Now, no 2 programs are alike, and no 2 roads are the same. Take, for instance, Adam Banks, the newly hired head coach at the Loomis Chafee School in Windsor. The Pelicans play their games in the Founders League, where 8 private schools carry a football program. So far, he's the only head coach of color in the league.
This is kind of where I've always been, been comfortable. Grew up on a football field. Had 2 older brothers that played football through, through Pee Wee. My dad was a Pee Wee coach, so this is like kind of my happy place.
Banks played football at Georgetown before starting on a road to coaching that included a successful run at Amherst College.
My first 5 years at Amherst, we actually won 4 times. One of them we shared for it, so we didn't get a ring. We got a watch because we weren't undefeated.
Now, at each stop, Banks was an assistant coach, and he noticed that while the size of each staff was different, the number of coaches of color was about the same.
When I started my first job was at a school like this. I was one of 2. And then I had the opportunity to go back to my alma mater, and I was one of 3. And it's typically been around, 2 to 3 as I've been at kind of my various stops.
And while he gave credit to the white colleagues that supported his journey, he also said that getting to each point meant adjusting to environments where he was one of few.
These are networked, positions, and generally speaking, people are going to go with who they feel comfortable with, and just kind of human nature has people feel comfortable with people who are either look like them, share similar experiences and things like that.
It's not just a hunch either. In fact, there's a term for it.
It's called homologous reproduction. You have a tendency to hire people who look like you and to keep them in power.
Dr. Donna Lopiano teaches at SCSU. Before that, she was a senior athletics administrator at the University of Texas. For systemic change, she proposes forming a diverse search committee to provide a diverse group of candidates.
You're not talking about 1. If your finalist pool is 4 or 5 or 6, half of that has to be your minority population. That's the only way we're going to change the system, is to have enough people in the pool who every one of which are qualified so that nobody has an excuse for not selecting them.
But why does this matter in the long run? For Harry Bell, who's been involved with Bridgeport youth for over a decade, it's just another reminder that diverse representation is important for the next generation.
When you have leadership that looks like you're more acceptable to it, but it's a mind thing. You believe that that can be you because he looked like you, he comes from where you come from, so that just make it a little more realistic.
Now, there are important takeaways here, and firstly, it's that you don't have to be black, brown, or from any specific ethnicity to be a guiding mentor for your players. I'll give you a perfect example. Last February, the Platt football program honored the accomplishments of their former black players and managers on their Twitter feed, and their head coach, Jason Bruin, who was white. But it's important that student athletes of color see themselves in their mentors, and providing that representation gives them the best chance to succeed on and off the field. In studio, Unkwasonye, Fox 61 Sports.